Good morning, everyone. Today is our bi-weekly Wake Up with YPN, and today we are going to be catching up with staying legal in the hot market tactics we've been seeing. I'm your host, Kayla Fisher, and in a tight market like this, it's important to check in to see what different tactics we've been experiencing. And I know that we're all trying to be creative and let our buyers win, but we want to assure that with those attractive offers, we're also staying legal. So today we have George Gomez, an attorney, back with us to help us go over some of these hot market tactics and how to stay legal with those. So if you have any questions that may come up or comments about things we're talking about, please put them in the comments below and we will get to them. Good morning, George. Thank you so much for joining us.
Kayla, good morning to you and all of you viewers out there. And thanks for the opportunity to be together with you again.
We really appreciate you hopping on with us this Monday morning. So we're going to dive right into a few tactics that we've seen. First is escalation clauses. Can you tell us a little bit about your summary of what these are and why they're used?
Yeah, Kayla, let me go back to what you said. Yeah, with this type of hot market, we need to be careful. Agents need to be careful. Brokers need to be careful as to what you do and what you put out there as far as representing clients in contracts, okay? Because it's such a competitive environment now that we have to make sure we do the right thing. So I'm start out by saying this when it goes to escalation clauses. I have a YouTube out. If you go to IAR YouTube, Iowa Association of Realtors YouTube, there's about a 6-7 minute video on escalation clauses. Okay, so we'll start with that because today, we'll highlight it. But again, go to that. It's a good refresher course. It's a good teaching video also. Escalation clauses will exist when a buyer makes an offer to a property at a specific price, but attaches this addendum escalation clause, if you will, stating that the buyer is willing to go up X amount of dollars, right? After receiving it, if the seller receives a higher offer up to a cap, okay, we'll say $500 above the next the bona fide offer that you get up to $10,000 more, 5,000, whatever it might be. So basically, it's just escalating the price up based on other offers that come in.
Right, exactly. And what is important for agents to understand when they're writing them into the offer, and what maybe forms to use when doing that?
And that, good question. Let me start out by saying this. There are some states that are prohibiting or are in the process of prohibiting basically making escalation clauses illegal. Okay, for realtors. There's a couple of reasons that's happening. One is I find out that realtors, a lot of them don't understand what they mean, don't understand how to prepare them, don't understand the vital language that's necessary. And the other important thing is this. As a lot of lawyers, right, and a lot of state realtor associations are now determining that realtor preparation of an escalation clause is the practice of law. So now we have the practice of law issue coming in, okay? But don't use escalation clauses all the time, Kayla. That's a bad thing. Don't say just because we have a hot market, we have to use an escalation clause. I'm going to give you an example, okay? My wife and I sold our house about a month ago, okay? We had an open house on Sunday. Monday, we had 7 showings. Monday night, we had a bidding war going on. Okay. Well, and I said, no escalation clauses. I want your highest and best number. Give me your number. What's one realtor do? He sends me an escalation clause. Right? That one was out right away. So, but you have to be careful when you use them. Use them if there's competitive offers. If there's multiple offers, you use them. You don't use them if your client only has X amount of money and really doesn't have any money to put into the escalation clause, okay? And sometimes escalation clauses favor your buyers because maybe they'll be able to buy a property for less than what they have budgeted. And sometimes it represents your sellers because maybe your sellers can get a higher price than what they're asking for initially on their property. So look at the circumstances of your clients.
Yeah, I think that's good to mention that even though they are becoming more popular, it's not always the best time to use them, and not every situation fits the needs of using an escalation clause. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of not putting it in our paragraph 27 as our extra, but using that fillable form by that's been put together by the attorneys available to our iCar members?
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of those forms okay, that attorneys have vetted for escalation clause. Like you said, like you rightly said, Kayla, those are the forms you should use. Those are the forms that you fill in the blanks. They've been vetted by attorneys. Okay. But what I find, Kayla, even when I view those, I have on my desk, I don't know, 3 or 4 of them that I got from different brokers who had different lawyers vet uh, those escalation forms. They can still be confusing. They can still be confusing. And I have one where it has an escalation, but it's so you go back and forth here, there, that is just confusing to both the client and the realtor. Okay. So you have to be careful to educate your client, but educate yourself first as to what that form really does. It might not do what you really want it to do or what you need it to do. Okay.
Yeah, it's important because there are so many different versions out there. And since this is a newer market tactic that we've been seeing, some realtors and agents, even on the other side, may not be familiar with it. And there are so many different versions and ways that can be done. It's important to make things as clear and concise as possible. So that way it's understandable by all.
Exactly.
So next is a topic that we've kind of started to see, and that is a clause that accelerates the expiration of an offer for a higher purchase price or different terms and conditions. So as an example that we've seen is if a seller chooses to accept an offer within a shorter time period, the price may be higher than if it goes to a different time period to encourage them to accept or accelerate their decision. Have you heard or seen any of that?
I have not. I've heard of it, yes. And I've been told examples of it, just as you stated, is the most common example I've seen. I've also had other examples to where an agent will go back to a buyer's agent and says, if you shorten the closing period from August 1 to July 15th, we'll accept your offer. If you shorten the time for financing from August 1 to July 15th, we'll accept your offer. But basically to accelerate the terms of the original contract. Yes, I've seen that. I have issues with that. There's something that we should all consider in real estate, and that's fairness to everybody. I think we have to be fair to everybody. And is that really fair to everybody when you put a bid out and you go back to that seller or that buyer comes to you, seller, and says, I'll accelerate my price if you accept my offer before the open house, or I'll accelerate my price if you accept my offer before the deadline of which you've given other agents to present their offers. Things like that. I think there's fairness, ethical considerations, best interests of client. How do you, it can just evolve into just big mess, in my opinion.
Yeah, with so much competition and different tactics out there, it's always going to be hard to please everyone, but also trying to keep your client's best interest in mind and helping them to win, but also being fair to the seller and the other buyers that might be out there. I can kind of understand that dilemma that some may have. Can you think of any time when something like that would be a beneficial tool to use?
To do what now,
For
Caleb? Go ahead. Repeat your question.
Can you think of any time where using that acceleration clause regarding purchase price and timeline might be beneficial? And is there anything definitely wrong with using it, or do you just feel like it's maybe an ethical dilemma?
I don't see anything wrong with it. If you're asking me, is there anything illegal about it? I can't think of anything illegal about it. But I go back to my fairness doctrine. And as far as helping someone or being beneficial to someone, obviously it could be beneficial to both parties. The seller would get more money, the buyer would get the property that they wanted. Okay, so
Right.
if you do it that way, it could be. Now, it kicks everybody out. So it can just be very confusing.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a risk management. Do I want to accept the higher offer now or wait to see what else will come in?
Exactly.
It's that idea, although having lots of offers is great, you really can only sell the house one time.
Right.
And sometimes purchase price is not the most important term or condition for the seller. Sometimes it's closing date or a financing deadline, like you said, because that might affect where they can go and what options they have available to them after they get their house under contract.
Yeah, and whether it's escalation clause or the acceleration that we just talked about, realtors, when you look at these and you're explaining these things to your client, your seller, or your buyer, Look at the net number. What's the net they're going to make, not what the gross is. Because like Kayla said, the higher number that's offered may not be the best offer for either of them. So look at the net. Everything should go around what that net number is.
Yeah, definitely, because there may be some extra credits, or maybe a longer closing date timeline will cost the seller more if they're paying that mortgage payment themselves until closing for another 2 or 3 months, even if the price is a little bit higher. I just want to check in real quick with our viewers and see if there's any questions that might have come up. Oh, here's one right here. Someone is asking, couldn't it be considered the practice of law to add anything to a contract that's not pre-written, or fill in the blank, I'm sure they're asking?
Yeah, I think it could be. It depends on what you add to it, right? I think it's very clear that you are allowed as agents just to fill in the blanks on those, right? So if you attach something to those blanks, like see Exhibit A, and then you draft all kinds of other contingencies, whatever, on Exhibit A that are not on that form, yes, I think that could be the practice of law in those situations. You got to be careful, right? It's a good broker question.
Yes, but you can probably see some reasonable things to add to that last fill in the blank paragraph, to add in to further clarify things in the contract, or add smaller things, right?
Yeah, I think that would be fine. But when you
Yeah.
start changing that form, when you start changing what that form addresses, that's where the issue comes in. Yeah, you can clarify it, of course.
Exactly. I always see some things pop up there in paragraph 27. That was a great question that ties in with what we're doing, and new ideas that may come up. If anyone who's watching has, oh, here's another one. David Moore asks that a lot of buyer agents have had questions about the way some sellers want offers, such as all offers to be submitted by X day and time, but seller reserves the right to accept offer at any time. Can you explain um, how this is being used, and your opinions on it?
Yeah, and I've seen this. And again, that goes to one of those fairness questions, if you will, right? I have no problem with all offers be submitted by X time and day, right? That's fair. On Monday at noon, I want all offers, right? I won't take any offers after Monday at noon. But then when the seller reserves the right to accept offer at any time, so they could accept an offer prior to that time. Okay. And what concerns me with that is when somebody says, again, we'll try to put all this together, the acceleration, the escalation, and this question here. When a buyer says, if you accept my offer before that time, I'll give you an extra 5,000. I'll give you an extra 10,000, right? That's the part that concerns me. Now, that being said, we have to understand that we are not the buyers and we are not the sellers. We are the agents. It's the buyer and seller's deal. It's not our deal. But our job is to inform them, I believe, and educate them as to what this means. And I think you have to impose and impress upon them your ethical duty of what you feel is the right thing to do and what you think where ethics takes you in these situations. But again, the seller reserves the right to accept offer at any time. I've seen that. I just, have some problems with it.
Yeah, I think it comes into play many times, because the buyer gets to decide when their offer for acceptance expires. So if they're not going to follow that guideline, and it may be the best or highest or most competitive offer they have, and it expires sooner, that can be where some sellers get into that dilemma of whether to move forward and accept something sooner using their competitive tactic, let it expire and hope it still stands, and see what else comes in. As you mentioned, it is not our decision. It is the buyers and sellers' decision, and it's our job to let them know the outcomes of different situations, and the ethics and the rules, and the standards that we all try to abide by.
Mhm.
So, those were some great questions that tied into our initial topics there. Does anyone have any other questions out there in the Facebook or live world, or any topics, George, that you'd like to touch on in addition to what we've talked about today?
Yeah, Kayla, there's one I'd like to touch on, just to kind of throw it out there, because I've gotten a lot of calls on this lately. And again, it goes back to the competitive market, right? And we can kind of akin it to the escalation issue. What does as is, where is mean? I mean, what does that mean? Right? Some people interpret it different. And again, I was asked by a broker here to prepare an as-is whereas addendum, and I did. But in preparing that, I got copies of other whereas as-is addendums, and the things that they say in there, the choices that the buyers can mark on what as-is whereas means to them, to me, is not as-is whereas. It's giving the buyers out. The buyer can get an inspection, but if the inspection reveals stuff that the buyer doesn't like, they can terminate withdraw the offer. I mean, things like that. I see that's not as-is whereas.
Yeah, I think that I've seen forms similar to that. And although some of the selection options on that form may not be considered what many would commonly consider as is, whereas I think that having those options available to review with even the buyer when filling those out, it helps to make sure that you had that conversation with your buyer to discuss all the options that are available. And so that they know they're selecting the option that really is possibly as is, whereas, and they know that the other options weren't selected. That way there's no unwritten or, kind of assumed loophole to get out.
No, exactly. I think they have to be specific and really understand, because the decision they make, which box they check, if there even is a box,
Right.
Makes an impact on them. And the other thing, Kayla, is that I don't care if it's as is, where is. Okay, if you have an as is, where is addendum, and you educate your client one way on it, whatever way, and talk to them whatever way you think is the right way to do. Remember one thing, you always have a legal duty as agents to disclose any material adverse facts. Okay, so even those
Right.
as is, whereas, agents, remember that the commission rules state that you must disclose any adverse material facts. That you cannot contract away.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great point to make for agents to be aware. So, do you have any other things to add before we wrap up for the day? I think we've had some great questions from our viewers. And if our viewers do have any questions, if they're watching this broadcast after, they can put them in the comments and we can reach out to Georgia or the association and get those answers for you, because these are really important things for our members and our agents to know and take into account and consideration while they're kind of navigating the competitive situations out there.
I always put myself out there. So if anybody has any questions, get to Kayla. She'll get them to me, or get to me directly, whatever is easier for you. I'll be more than glad to help anything. At the end of the day, our goal is to do the right thing. Our goal is to uphold not only your personal integrity, but uphold the integrity of the profession. So I'm all in for that.
Yes, George, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a great morning. And we really appreciate you taking the time to join us today and help us be better prepared for everything that's out there.
Anytime. Thank you.
All right. You have a great morning.
Hey, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone.